So TIFF was incredible. I had never been to Canada, so that was my first time. My biggest worry was that I was gonna cross over the border and they were gonna let your boy back in. But it literally took me like 2 hours to be in Canada to become completely addicted to Tim Hortons. The people in Toronto were super dope. Yeah, like I said, it was my first time being at TIFF, and I was able to watch a bunch of movies. And film festivals are like the one place where you end up eating popcorn for breakfast. You travel all this way, sometimes over borders, to like these very scenic places, and you just spend hours upon hours in a dark room with strangers you don't even know. I completely adore it. I love it. And Toronto being the one place where they play a lot of the movies that are about to get a bunch of Oscar buzz, I went and I watched a bunch to pretty much, for those of you who are like wondering what you should put in your Oscar pool, the things that you like should look out for, I don't know if this list is going to be accurate, but this is a list of everything that I've seen ranked all 16.
This a rolling, not a stop. Watch shit don't never stop.
As I always say when I make a film festival video, like the worst isn't really like the worst movie out there. It's just your least favorite of the fest. And the thing about In Fabric was that I am a huge fan of this director's previous movie. So I'm always going to talk about it. Duke of Burgundy, definitely go check out that movie. That movie's incredible. So I was really hyped up for this one. And the thing is, this is like a movie about a satanic dress, a demonic dress that comes to life and tries to kill people. Like, honestly, that is what this movie is about. And while I thought that was a fantastic premise, it's one of those movies that when you go watch it with a midnight crowd who, you know, midnight screenings are incredible, except when you get those people who laugh at every little thing, if you know what I'm talking about. Like, literally, the main lady can just get changed back for buying the dress and people will laugh. It's like, bro, it ain't that funny. However, the thing with this movie is that it feels like the director had a phobia of mannequins and just watched a bunch of ASMR videos and then decided to make this movie.
A lot of it came from my going to sleep at night with YouTube on the ASMR channel, listening to whispering and page turning, lots of catalogs.
Oh. Now, the way this one was pitched to me was that it was a town that had a mass shooting, but the mass shooting was also orchestrated by the town. And I was like, all right, that sounds really interesting. And what it ends up being is that there's these group of guys who are in this warehouse and they're trying to figure out who started this mass shooting. And it pretty much becomes like this huge game of, like, if you've ever played LA Noire is what I called it. You're trying to figure out off of the expressions of these people who it could possibly be. And it's one of those movies when you finally realize what's going on by the end of it, you may want to rewatch it. But then it made me go back to LA Noire, and where if you've ever played it, it's really cool because you're trying to figure out who's guilty or who's not. But that game also had a bunch of glitches because it was a video game, so sometimes it wasn't really that authentic. I feel like some of the directing or acting here kind of made the ending not pay off as strong as it could have. This is going to be the Blumhouse movie that everyone's going to be talking about, whether you like it or not. Everyone on Twitter is going to be talking about this thing opening weekend because you know your girl Ramona, she's been making the most talked about movies, the biggest cinematic masterpieces of the past year, and this is right up there. Pretty much the movie is her as the most obnoxious girl possible who's got two parents who are divorced, and she does something. An incident happens that causes her parents to have to create the lie that is covering up for her. But things just escalate and escalate and escalate to the point that I have never seen a movie just steadily decline, to the point that it was easily one of the worst movies I had seen at the festival. And then in the last 5 minutes, something happens and it literally went to the top of my list and then just disappeared. Like it went, like if the graph would go down and then goes up, then it just stops. It just gets raptured. I don't know really where this movie falls because I need to check it out one more time. But if you've ever seen the movie The Mist, and you know how that ending goes, this is the new The Mist. If you've seen Olivier Assayas, I believe is how you pronounce his name's previous films like The Clouds of Sils Maria, Personal Shopper with Kristen Stewart, he loves lingering his shots a little bit. Nonfiction, which I don't know what I want to say it translates to Double Lies in French, is a French film that France decided, hey, this is the one that's getting the most buzz. And France disqualified. There's a whole conversation about that, how with France with Cannes, there have been a bunch of a-holes with it. And even with this film getting a bunch of buzz, they screwed it over to not get any Oscar recognition. Regardless, Pretty much this whole movie is about a bunch of authors, writers, publishers talking about like Twitter, talking about digital media versus physical media. And it's like, when they're talking about that, it's super interesting. But everything else that happens in the movie about like their own personal lives, I would say that for the casual viewer, they're not going to care about that. If you don't eat croissants for breakfast every morning, you're not going to care about that stuff. But there is that part of the movie that's super interesting, because I used to be that dude who's like, if I'm going to purchase something for $20 or $25, I want the steelbook. I want the whole Blu-ray slipcover. Now I'm at the point where I'm not going to be carrying around my Space Jam steelbook everywhere I go. I literally can stream it off the cloud. This movie is 2001: A Sex Odyssey. I've never seen a movie that's supposed to take place out of this world, but it has more seamen than it has spacemen. This is by Claire Denis, who maybe you've seen some of her films in film school, or you've gone back and tried to, like, I don't know, I believe she has a bunch of movies that are on the Criterion Collection. I know one of her biggest films has that ending where before Tommy Wiseau took the song, this was like one of the most, like, what she does in her movies is that there's a bunch of lingering shots and everything's super quiet. And then there's a very emotional shot. You'll get to just a bunch of space scenes. Then all of a sudden, you got your girl riding a Sibian like crazy, and you don't know what's going on. This is a movie where it's a bunch of criminals that go up into space, and that's pretty much become their prison, but at the same time, this space station, this voyage that they're going on is supposed to figure out. They're supposed to find a way to get alternate energy back to Earth. But at the same time, Juliette Binoche is playing Juliette from Lost, and she's trying to figure out how to have babies with these people up in space. And it gets into some wild territory with an ending that some people came out confused and they hated it. Some people came out just confused like I did. And other people came out confused and they called it a masterpiece. Thomas Vinterberg will always get my respect because this is the dude who made The Hunt. I highly recommend watching The Hunt, so anything that he makes, I'll always be there. And Kursk is a Russian movie. It's one of those Russian movies where it's like not even in Russian. They're speaking English, so that takes away a little bit from it. But it's a Russian movie about the real life submarine tragedy that happened, and where this submarine that was supposed to be carrying all of these like war bombs ends up going off, and they're down below, and the Russians refuse to get any help from it anywhere else. It's a really depressing story, but I'd say it's worth watching it specifically for a shot that happens towards the end with this little kid who just went boss mode. I mentioned a movie called Burden back at Sundance about this guy who was a Klan member, and they pretty much treated him leaving the Klan like a dude trying to quit heroin cold turkey. Substitute the Klan for neo-Nazism, and that's what you got in this movie right here. Jamie Bell, I want to say, gives it his all. Like, that's the best part of the movie. This one is actually based off of a true story, just like Burden, and it's this dude who, all over his skin, he's got all these tats, so it doesn't even matter if he's trying to leave. Like, there's no way, one, that he can get away from his neo-Nazi family, but, like, how are you gonna get a job when you got all these tattoos all over your face? And that's kind of like what the movie's trying to cover. I want to say it's like 2 hours long. It's a good story, but Jamie Bell's pretty much the one that carries it all. Whiplash is one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't know if it's gotten to the point where it's become like a Fight Club, where it's cliche to say I don't think it's there yet, so I will continue saying that I adore Whiplash. I love that movie. I also like La La Land under Whiplash, and I think that the ending is fantastic. I'm not one of those La La Land haters from when it came out. First Man is under La La Land for me. And the thing with First Man is that I understand that the whole 2/3 of the movie, the first 2/3 of it, is supposed to show you how Ryan Gosling, who's literally just playing every other Ryan Gosling character out there, it's not a bad thing, but how he's supposed to be this very unemotional character, and that's why Armstrong is able to go through this mission, because he has no problem facing a bunch of difficulties. At the same time, that's still a boring character that you're seeing for 2/3 of the movie. I don't hate the first 2/3. I think it's okay, but if you like the first 2/3 or you want to see something better, go see Apollo 13. Go see The Right Stuff. That really gets into the whole training side of it. But if there's one thing Damien does in all of his damn movies, it's that he kills it with that third act. The whole time I was watching this in IMAX, I was like, why is this? Oh, that's why. My man pulled a Wizard of Oz with this movie, and if you're not watching this in IMAX, you might as well not watch it at all. Oh, and by the way, that controversy about the First Man in the flight is the dumbest thing. I'll make an LME on it. There's no controversy. I usually have a rule when I go to a film festival, and that's to not necessarily catch any Netflix movies. It's not like I'm trying to avoid them, but usually the Netflix movies are just coming out like the following month or the next couple of weeks, so I want to see something else where, you know, they don't really have a release date. But this one, I was super hyped for because it's Jeremy Saulnier's new movie. I had a free opening to watch it, and it was being screened, so I caught it, and it is one of the most confusing movies that was out there. Some people utterly hated this movie, but I thought it was interesting. You pretty much have this lady who's living out in the middle of, I want to say like Alaska, and her kid just gets eaten by a wolf because that's just what happens in Alaska. So she decides to call this dude who, I guess, killed a wolf at one point, but this dude's super old, so I don't even know how he's supposed to help her out, but he goes to Alaska because he gets this letter, and it pretty much becomes, if you've seen the movie The Ritual, which was out on Netflix, and Wind River, which I highly recommend, also out on Netflix. It's both of those movies, they've married each other and they've had this kid. Hold the Dark, however, goes completely bonkers by the third act of this movie. There are scenes that drag out way too long. I still thought they were captivating. Other people were sighing and were getting completely bored out of them. I, however, think that while it's not Jeremy Saulnier's best movie, I think it's interesting enough to make an LME on it, and I think that it's some of the best direction that he's done, especially when he's directing Alexander Skarsgård. Jeffrey Wright is just acting like Jeffrey Wright and everything else. The last 45 minutes of this movie, I understand why people are calling it a complete and utter masterpiece. But there's like 2 hours that precede it, though. You know, like, I understand why people are loving it, and I do think it's a very well-made movie. But like Burning, this is a very long burn, and it's not to say that you can't be patient with the first parts of it. There is a lot that happens in the first 3/4 of this movie that then help out towards the ending of it. But are we gonna lie and say that there's not a couple of shots with the main character looking up at certain towers, doing certain things that can't be cut? Yes, there are a bunch of things, but this is a movie about this guy who's this writer, and he meets this girl, and eventually he sees your boy Stephen Yeun from The Walking Dead, who kills it in this performance, and things start escalating a little bit because he likes this girl, but this girl's also hanging out with this other dude, and it's like a movie that kind of deals with paranoia. It also deals with like him writing a novel. It also deals with things that I had no idea might be dealing with. Like I said, the last 45 minutes are fantastic, and it plays off of Burning and the multiple meanings that the title may have. But the director was there, and you would think that the director would not fully clarify things, but not make it even more confusing, because some person had asked, hey, are we able to see the ending this way? I just want to make sure it's not too far-fetched what I'm thinking. And the director goes, oh yeah, you can see it that way, and this way, and 4 other ways. I had no idea you can even view the movie. This probably had the most mixed reactions at the festival from the critics who weren't on their phones. Look, I like Xavier Dolan, right? This is a dude who, like, at 24 years old, had, like, 5 movies under his belt. This guy, like, he made the Adele video. He made Hello. He directed that. This dude will call out critics if he doesn't believe that they're really watching his movies correctly. Like the critics like TIFF who would just leave halfway through. But this, I understand why I got mixed reviews, because this is supposed to be like his magnum opus. This is the biggest cast. I want to say this is one of his longest movies, kind of. It was supposed to be, at least at one point, in where you got this guy who's like a CW star, John F. Donovan, and it's supposed to be retelling the death and life of him, particularly because you got this boy who was writing letters to him. And I believe, as I was hearing at the festival, it's based off of Xavier himself, who would write letters to Leonardo DiCaprio. And this movie was supposed to be 5 hours long at one point. And if you think DC does a bad job, or Warner Bros. Does a bad job editing down their movies, bro, this feels like a commercial for the movie we're supposed to get, and it's 2.5 hours long. Now, I know that sounds like I'm complaining about it, and I have it higher up in my list, but the thing is that I admire it. Like, there's so much in this movie that I really do like. It's one of those movies where it's so cheesy. You got your kid from The Room, Jacob Tremblay, right? I think he's a fantastic actor. Should an 11-year-old be saying the monologue stuff that he's saying in this movie? Absolutely not. Y'all know that Xavier Dolan is known for always having a random sex scene, LGBT sex scene in like neon lighting spot. It's happened spontaneously throughout the movie. There's always has to be an overbearing mother. There always has to be like this big monologue scene that you know that character wouldn't write. It's Xavier writing it on his own. And Xavier, by the time that he dies, is going to force every single hit song that was on his playlist in the early 2000s. He's just going to force it in there. But there's something admirable about this movie, and I want to like it more because I want to see the 5-hour cut. Jessica Chastain has like 3 different wigs that she wore in this movie. She is nowhere to be seen in the 2.5-hour cut of this movie. This man just completely cut her out of this movie. Release the Chastain cut. This is American Animals, but in Mexico. They're more likable. Pretty much, I feel like Gael Garcia, he's always going to play like a high school. He's not a high school student in this movie, but he's always going to be able to play like the youngest character possible because this dude doesn't age. But it's pretty much him and his buddy who go out in El DF, which is Mexico City, and they just pull this huge heist on all of the stuff that's there, all of the Mexican artifacts. And things may or may not go their way, but the beauty of it is that when I first saw the movie, I thought it was weird. Like, there's a bunch of things that this movie does different, not so much in the heist story, but in the way that it tells the heist story, and where when they're doing the heist, it's a montage of stills, but they're not images, right? The director literally has the actors just stand there and hold their breath as he cuts to different shots of them. There'll randomly be a scene where a fight sequence happens, and they'll break the fourth wall and narrate it. There's glitches, there's jump cuts randomly in the movie. And when the movie wraps up, they give you this little line at the end, and I was like, okay, it's a fine movie. I'm sitting in my next screening, and halfway through the next screening, I finally connect what that line means as I relate it to a story that was told, a little anecdote halfway through the movie. And I'm sitting in this other screening going, oh my goodness, this is genius. So now it's my must-watches. Like I said, I like covering everything that I watched up to this because even though the other ones, some I enjoyed, some I didn't enjoy that much, puts it on your radar. If you like it and it becomes your must-watch, that's my job here, right? I'm the internet blockbuster dude just recommending things. But these are my top 5 must-watches, the things I like the most out of TIFF. And the first one is If Beale Street Could Talk. This is the best romance movie of 2018 in my opinion. There's still a couple more that can come out, but so far, this one's it. And the beauty of it is because it doesn't do anything overbearing. It's probably the most simplistic story. These two love each other just because they were raised together. Like, they've never had anyone else in their lives, or they're like, I mean, you're the person I've known the longest. It almost sounds like you're looking down on the relationship, but that was like the most beautiful part of it. There's not this bearing thing of love. Now, there's not this big monologue that they tell each other. They just love each other. It's like a sibling love. It's weird to explain, but it's beautiful the way that he directs it. And the thing about this movie is that you know that there's going to be a lot of people comparing it to Moonlight, and people wondering, oh, what's better, Moonlight or this? And I'm not one of those people who goes, that conversation can't be said. They're 2 different stories. 2 movies under the same director. Yeah, you can definitely talk about both of them. I think Moonlight's the better movie, but I still think you can enjoy this movie separately and not have to compare the 2 and say that, oh, it's a step down. If Beale Street Could Talk, the beginning of it, it's beautiful. The way he shoots it, the way he does, what I want to call the Barry Jenkins shot of just shooting that profile and having what I think was one of the best scenes of the festival when a reveal happens to the in-laws, because this whole story is about this couple and the wife having to look out for the husband because he's been wrongfully accused or convicted of something that he clearly didn't do. And while the ending of it, there's been different debates about whether it hits the mark or whether it doesn't hit the mark. And, if you can relate to it, it's obviously going to hit more for you. Seeing a bunch of other movies that have covered that type of ending, the execution of it and the way that it just cuts flat, it cuts forward a couple more years as opposed to the amount of time it was spending in the beginning. I think the beginning is gracefully told. I can't wait to see the first 2/3 again. The last third, I understand it. I just wish it would have had a bigger impact. And I know it's going to impact a lot of other people, and not looking down at it in any way, shape, or form. There's just other movies that had a better execution, a better finale than Beale Street could. But this still has one of the best scenes with the reveal scene. My Uncle Coron went into his Netflix bag and he wrote, directed, shot. I wouldn't be surprised if he edited this movie as well. Maybe did the music. I have no idea. Maybe he was one of the characters in this thing. He went into this movie and he gave it his all. And this is one of those movies where I know it's going to come out on Netflix. I just feel like 75% of people who watch it, I'm telling you right now, while I enjoyed it, a lot of people are going to think this is the most overrated, boring thing out there, which is why I feel like this is one of those movies that definitely needs to have that theatrical run, because for those who have seen the Harry Potter movie that he made, big fan of it, love Harry Potter movies. For those who have seen Gravity, which was his last movie, they're going to go into this thinking that it's going to be like very engaging and, you know, like one of the biggest Oscar movies, and it is one of the biggest Oscar movies, but it is also one of the biggest slow burns, because a lot of headlines have been saying that this is his most personal movie, and it definitely is. This man went out and he cast this, I believe she's like a preschool teacher. She's never really acted in anything before, and this actress plays this maid to this rich family in Mexico City, I want to say like in the 70s or 80s, and that's it. You just go day in and day out on their life. And, you know, Cuarón just puts a little subtleties here and there to pick up on what's going on with the family and their dynamics, but that's really it. There is a side of it and where the story is taking place adjacent to like this big event, real life event that happened, of this like massacre that happened to a bunch of college students in Mexico City. But he doesn't even like treat it, because this is a foreign language film, so in the setting of this film for its audience, it's almost like Americans when we watch a movie and we see like burning Twin Towers or we see just 9/11. It doesn't need to be explained to us what happened that day. We automatically know what it is. That's what he just does. He doesn't over-explain to you what's happening in this event. He just tells you, oh yeah, this event happened, but we're focused on the sideline story that's happening over here. And like I said, I think a lot of people are going to think it's very boring and not realize that it's more of this character study, if not just like dropping yourself in the world of somebody who you may not really relate to, or the in and outs that you may go through. And that doesn't mean it's not going to hit you. I am not for trigger warnings in movies. But there is a scene that happens later on in this movie where if you've dealt with anything like this, I wasn't ready. On top of that, this movie I do believe needs to be seen in theaters, because while it is shot in black and white, and I'm pretty sure most of us have really good TVs, you need to have a good audio system, because I kept listening to things. Like there was like kids who kept talking behind, and I was like, why are they talking? It was coming from the mixing in the movie.
What do we do about the bones?
We do this.
Green Book. Look, Oscar bait is a thing. We all know this. Obviously, there's campaigns that need to be done, and whoever does the best campaign, that's who wins the Oscars. I understand that this movie is clearly Oscar bait. It's also enjoyable, right? Like this is a real life story that's directed by one of the brothers who did Dumb and Dumber. There's Something About Mary. Look, when I saw the trailer to this, I did not think I was going to like it as much as I did. It definitely looked like it was going to be this cliche thing, this very like, you know, oh, we're talking about race and stuff like that. I thought the trailer was trash. I love this movie because this thing's like a straight up comedy, feel-good movie. I know that we've become so cynical that when a movie's about race, either everyone's supporting it blindly or people are not liking it because they think it's a little too overbearing. I'm always the first to say that. It may be overbearing to a bunch of other people. I liked it. I know that there's the crowd pleaser term has now become like a negative thing to say, oh, this is a crowd pleaser. But I'm a proud of the crowd. I was pleased. I liked it because Mahershala Ali, he plays this guy who he's a doctor because he's a big musician. He lives on top of Carnegie Hall. Mahershala Ali's the definition of grace. And he needs to go down to the South, and he needs somebody, a bodyguard played by your boy Viggo Mortensen, who needs to kind of guide him through the South because of these times. And he uses a green book, which is pretty much a layout of all of the hotels and restaurants that he can go to because he's black. And it's pretty much a road buddy comedy movie type of thing. I know it's not saying that going on a road trip with a black person and a white person is going to heal racism. It's not saying that at all, but it is a true story of these two. I believe it's written by the son of one of the dudes. I liked it. Viggo Mortensen is a complete and utter buffoon, and he's one of my favorite characters of the year. I can see a movie that I can definitely critique and be like, oh, there's some cheesy parts. There's a moment in this movie that makes no sense, right? Mahershala Ali gets upset. He tells him to pull the car over just so he can give a monologue in the rain. We all know why he's giving the monologue in the rain. It doesn't make any sense. He could have given it in the car, but he does it because he wants that to be the scene, the little clip that they play when it says supporting actor Mahershala Ali, and then they play that scene. I can critique that and be like, that makes absolutely no sense. But also really dig and enjoy what he's saying and be moved by what he says in that scene. When I had said that I enjoyed Ocean's 8 because I really liked the cast and I think the story is just as absurd as all the other ones in the franchise, people just completely ignore that. It just went from like, nope, you hate it if you critique it in any way, shape, or form. Mainly because I'm a really big believer that, ladies, Hispanics, blacks, whoever you are. I don't just want hand-me-downs, right? I don't just want reboots of franchises or sequels. Ocean's 8, I think, was done okay, but I'm always for making an original property. Widows is that original property. I will say this. This is a movie directed by Steve McQueen, who's made these films over here. This is clearly his biggest blockbuster to date. And the only thing against it is that there are moments with it being like a heist movie dealing with widows where some characters will explain back what should already be obvious, but it's clear they're doing it for the audience. And besides those points, I think the movie was fantastic. I really enjoyed the way that it's shot, the actors. One of the biggest points like that stood out to me was that all of the trailers had pitches that like this really dark, serious drama, like almost a thriller. Half of it is a comedy. Like if you watch the movie and you watch the trailers back, they'll literally cut around the punchlines to a bunch of the jokes to make it more serious. I don't know who's in charge of the marketing for that, but literally I want to say like a good, maybe a little bit under half of this is a bunch of comedic jokes. It's very twisty and turny. There is a lot in this movie that I think can be dissected, even though it's probably his biggest blockbuster, like I said. He still doesn't dumb down a lot of things. There are some things I feel the studio made him do, but there are like a bunch of mirrored shots, a bunch of mirrored symbolism. There is this beautiful shot, all right, where Colin Farrell plays this, he's a politician, he's running for something, and it takes place in Chicago, so some of these streets, like, I recognized, and he's driving the car from, like, what is this super down urban area, and it's just on the hood of the car, and all the camera's doing is just panning from one side to the other in this whole 5-minute car ride, and how it goes from literally just turning a corner, and you go from the most like burnt down houses to his freaking mansion. That scene alone says so much, and Stephen McQueen needs to get nominated. Finally, my last one. You know, I want to take my time with these videos. If you care about the list, like I said, I always have them down below. You would have seen them all. If you've seen this whole thing and you like seeing me talk about movies, comment Mumford down below. Boy's got new albums coming out. A huge Mumford vet. I'm excited, but I'm just as big of a fan of Jonah Hill's mid-90s. If you've ever listened to Kick Push, if you ever rocked to that by Lupe back in the day, if you skated, I don't even skate because I skated one time, busted my stuff, I knew better than that, but I hung out with so many skaters. If you remember Trifling Tunes back on YouTube, like, there's no way you're not going to love this movie. This is like this year's Boyhood. For those who liked Boyhood, I'm okay with I'm not the biggest fan of it, but this is like the feelings that I feel y'all got with that. And this is a movie that, like, it was kind of split for some people who were watching it because considering the fact that Jonah Hill is directing these kids in the 90s, it's an A24 movie, which the A24 logo in the beginning, the way that he placed it in there, the soundtrack to this movie, Trent Reznor, they do the score. There is a whole aspect of this movie where I know some people are going to say, oh, it's just advocating for this masculinity of boys will be boys. I don't think that's what it's doing at all. I think it's authentically looking at these kids and the problems that they go through. Some of which I don't even like the main character. That's the beauty of it. I think the main character, this kid, he's great as an actor. He's a brat. But the whole point of it is how he mixes in with these other kids and how skateboarding becomes their outlet. There's a documentary on Hulu, great documentary called Minding the Gap. That is the documentary version of this feature, and this is the feature version of that documentary. I adored this movie mainly because of the way that I feel like we're gonna get this wave of 90s stuff after getting this whole wave of 80s things. I think that the actors in this, specifically this dude right here, who at points scared me because this man, if y'all rocked with X, and if you know how X would like give speeches and stuff like that, if you know what I'm talking about, I think what had it was this kid's eyes. Like he's got a look in his eyes that remind you of X, like being reincarnated. You're going to enjoy this movie if you're a 90s kid, if you've been waiting for like the new Boyhood. I really don't know how else to describe, because I know to some people it's not going to be much because it's just going to be a bunch of like kids skateboarding and they're not going to understand it. But there is a scene, this shot right here, that I believe is one of the most standout moments of the year from two of the youngest actors out there. And this is the movie that I've thought about the most specifically because of that scene right there. And Jonah Hill's got one. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I have an end of summer one coming up. So for those of you who've been talking about the August, September wrap up, I'm making it like an end of summer type thing. A lot of people just said, oh, don't give us all your bad ones, just give us your must watch. Don't title the video must watch if it's not good. So yeah, that one's just gonna be must watches. I'm still on the road, like I said. I'll be doing a video wrapping up stuff on the road. I will also be at the Chicago International Film Festival throughout the entire week. So if you're there, let me know. Maybe we'll hit up some screenings or eat some food there, go to Shake Shack, something like that. And I'll be making a video on that one as well for the ones that I had missed. Shoplifters being like the really big one that I'm looking forward to. And then the Bradley Cooper one comes out like in a week, so I'll be making a video on that one as well. But other than that, yeah, let me know your movies that you're looking forward to. Like I said, I'm still on the road here, so I'm going to be making a video wrapping up all that stuff, how we got scammed in Boston, all these other crazy things out there. But those are my picks for TIFF. Let me know what you're looking forward to, and catch up on American Vandal on Netflix.